Hello.
Oh, what happened to Peter?
Yeah, where did Peter go?
Well, it's not good.
Good morning, all.
Hi, Donna.
Hello.
And Peter Kahn won't be on either. He's our vice chair, so we need Peter to get back here.
Or else, Kathy, you're next in line. You can
Yeah,
read the
right.
script. You can read the script.
Pam Swan's on. To go find it. Let me go find it while we're waiting.
Just make it up, approximate is 8, that's all.
Uh,
Kathy, while we're waiting, can I ask the non-members who are on the call, on the Zoom, what prompted them to join the meeting? And how they found out about it?
sure, go ahead.
If any of you who are not members wish to speak up and how did you find out about the meeting and why are you attending? We'd appreciate it. That would help us sort of in the future as we figure out how to do publicity and do meetings that are of interest to people.
Hi, it's Chris Newell.
Hi.
I saw it on Nantucket Current. I think it was Nantucket Current, which we get every day in our emails, and clicked on it and was curious. We live in Brant Point.
And are interested in the topic?
Of course, absolutely.
Okay.
As you should be.
We're on Willard Street, so we feel like we're right in the middle of it.
One of my neighbors.
We won't hold that against her.
And I'm Brad Strand. My wife saw it in the Nantucket Current also and told me about it. So I'm in California. She's still up sleeping because it's still pretty early out this way. But we live in Matticat in the summertime. We'll be there in about 2.5 weeks.
Okay.
And
Was
I'm
it the particular subject of the meeting or the non-voting taxpayers, in general?
I would say yes is the answer to that question.
Okay.
I very often get assigned tasks. Here's something you should attend and take notes for me, type deal, and that's what this is.
Okay.
And I'm Rob Baxter. I'm recently moved full-time to Nantucket, I guess maybe about a year ago. I'm interested both in the non-voting taxpayers and, of course, the erosion issues.
Okay, thank you.
And I also heard about it in Daybreak Nantucket.
Thank you.
Okay, there's Peter.
Yay.
Okay, apologize. I have electricians working in the house, and at precisely 10 o'clock, they turned off the power to the internet. But it's back on. I couldn't have planned it any better. But anyway, police will be here shortly because there are a bunch of dead electricians upstairs.
I think we have a quorum.
Yep.
And we are
Okay, we have
It only would have been better, Peter, if they kept the power off
Okay,
all day.
Are we on
You
the
have-
record now?
Yes, we're recording, so you need to
Okay.
read the script. I was just about to start it for you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so welcome everybody to the duly noticed and scheduled meeting of the Advisory Committee of non-voting taxpayers, not non-paying taxpayers. I understand we have a quorum. I just run through for the record in no particular order. I know Kathy Baird is here. Scott Ulm is not here. Patty Deuster. No.
Here.
Garrett Beller here.
Here.
Michael Cody, and Patty is here now too. Good.
Yes.
Here. I like to put Peter Kahn.
Not here.
It's the
Hello.
Duke game.
Yeah. Lou Bisano. No. Don Green.
Here.
Great. Pamela Swan. Gene Briskman.
Yeah,
Great. Donna Martino. I saw you
Here.
here.
Yes,
Lynn Flipsky.
Yes,
Lynn.
yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Steve Perlman.
Here.
Great. Bill Gardner. Saw you here. And myself. Great. We have a quorum. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for
So moved.
today's meeting?
second.
Great. And before I go to the next thing, just to remind everybody, it's a hybrid meeting. Everything's being recorded. If you have any private personal information that you would rather not be shown on the screen, you can turn your screen off. I will be, in terms of the performance of the meeting, we're going to go through the agenda. I will call on committee members first and members of the public second. There will be opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. So there we go. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting?
I'll move. Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the motion passed. So thank you. We are fortunate to have as our guest this morning, Leah Hill, who is the coordinator for coastal resilience in Nantucket. Leah has a resume that says she's the right person for the job, and I think she has a track record that confirms that. Before doing coastal resistance, she used her training as a marine biologist in the town, and I believe, Leah, you also have a master's degree from the University of Florida.
Yes.
As I recall, and so you are the expert of the day, and we welcome you to this. And I know you have a very, very detailed presentation. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks everyone for having me. Like Peter said, I'm Leah Hill. I'm the town's coastal resilience coordinator. So I work out of the natural resources department. So I'm going to share my screen, and I've got a lot of slides. So Peter, if I'm going over my time limit, just stop me. And when I share my screen, I won't be able to see everyone on it. So if we can hold questions till the end, that would be great.
Hi, honey.
Okay, can everyone see that?
I can.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay,
I can see it.
okay, great. So my contact information is down here if you want to reach out to me after the presentation. You can also find it on the town's coastal resilience website. Today, I'm going to be talking about the coastal risks that we face here on Nantucket. I'll go over the town's coastal resilience plan, and I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but if you'd like me to come back to another meeting and talk all about the plan, I'm happy to do so. I'll go through the recommendations that are recommended from now out to 2030 that are in the Coastal Resilience Plan. And then I'll focus on 3 projects that are underway right now. All right, so here on Nantucket, we face essentially 5 coastal risks. So the first is erosion, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with. We have one of the highest erosion rates in Massachusetts. The second is groundwater table rise. So this is an interesting phenomenon that not a lot of people know about, but what is projected is that as sea level rises, it will push up and is pushing up on our groundwater, so our aquifer lens, causing fresh water to come to the surface. So this means in areas that used to historically be dry are now becoming wet. So this picture is actually the what we call the circle on Easton Street, that if you go around it, then it goes to Holbert Ave. That corner of the circle is becoming a wetland, developing into a wetland because that fresh water is coming to the surface, it's changing the soils. So this can have impacts further inland. So people that are, not on the coast, miles inland can be experiencing groundwater table rise, and this can have significant effects on people's property. So, basements that get flooded, or they're having wetlands in their area. So now that means that they're in Concom jurisdiction, so they'd have to get certain permits to do work on their property. It can cause saltwater intrusion. This is happening on Smith's Point, where saltwater is getting into or mixing with the groundwater, and people can't drink their tap water anymore because it's salty. Then we have 3 different types of flooding. We have coastal flooding, which is down here on the left-hand corner. That's from our storms, so a lot of those nor'easters. And then there's stormwater flooding, which is from rain. This is actually a picture that I took in this September, when we had a huge rainstorm. I think it was equivalent to the 100-year rain event. And this is all fresh water flooding Easy Street. And then we have high tide flooding or sunny day flooding. Again, this is a picture I took in this November, when we had 4 consecutive days of sunny day flooding, which means that there was no storm event. It wasn't really that windy, and you can see all of the water on Easy Street, and that's caused by sea level rise. So before the Coastal Resilience Plan was developed, the town did an island-wide risk assessment, and we looked at mostly public property, critical infrastructure, also private property, and said, okay, if we take no action, what is going to happen here with the sea level rise projections, the erosion projections, and all of that? What's going to be damaged? What roadways are at risk? And which facilities are at risk as well. So from that risk assessment, it had over 2,000 structures are at risk through 2070, and 34 are essential community facilities. 84% of at-risk buildings are residential, 9% are commercial, 49% are historic. With that risk assessment, it broke it up into different timeframes, so 2030, 2050, and 2070. So Peter asked me to focus on the 2030, so that's what I am going to do today. So for 2030, monthly high tide risks, we could lose as much as 10 miles of public and private roadways, and this is including Easy Street. We could lose 268 acres of wetland resources, could be submerged. So a lot of our marshes could be drowned out. And then the first bridge at Matticat Road, that is at risk for high tide flooding, and 3.5 miles of water and sewer lines as well. For erosion, there's 6 miles of public and private roads that are at risk, there's 312 acres of public open space and about a tenth of a mile of sewer and water lines that are at risk. For the 1% annual chance storm, so that's a storm that would have 1% at any given year to occur. It's also what people know as the 100-year storm, although that's misleading because it doesn't happen every 100 years. It actually happens more frequent than that. There's 8 miles of sewer and 10 miles of water that are at risk. So with all of this risk assessment, we wanted to know the dollar value. If the town and private property owners take no action to implement the coastal resilience plan, where are we at? And these circular dots signify specific amounts of money. So you can see most of the pink dots are in our downtown and Brant Point area, and those are one dot is equal to $50 million. The green dots are 2.5 million, and the white dot is about $50,000. So with that, if you add all those up, the projected damages and losses due to erosion and flooding, if we take no action, and I mean the town and private property owners, is as much as $3.4 billion from when the plan was developed out to 2070. So that's cumulative annual costs. So essentially for every dollar we spend on coastal resilience projects, we'll be saving money in the long run. The Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee and I made this pamphlet, and I'm happy to email this over. I also have a lot of them printed, so when you come back on island, if you'd like to have one, I'm happy to give you, one or a couple. So this guide is really tailored to real estate agents, home buyers, and private property owners. And in June, I actually taught a continuing education class for real estate agents and brokers about the coastal resilience plan and about the risks that we face on the island. Because now that they know that information, when they have prospective home buyers, they need to disclose the risks that are associated with that property. So this pamphlet is very thorough. You can scan the different QR codes and enter your address and see what risks your property faces. So there's the FEMA flood maps. There's the Massachusetts Coastal Flood Risk Model. So that's a model to predict coastal flooding for 2030, 2050, and 2070. Groundwater table rise, that's a bit more tricky. There's not a model for that yet on island. But if you are interested in that, you'd have to hire a professional hydrogeologist to come out to your property and do an evaluation. And then there's non-regulatory FEMA erosion projection maps. These maps were done, actually Nantucket was the first in the United States to get these maps done back in 2020. And each color signifies a different time range. So 2030 is the yellow, 2050 is the orange, and 2100 is the purple. Unfortunately, with the current administration, I cannot access these maps anymore. So that's a little bit tricky. Okay, so I'm just going to switch gears. Now you have an overview of the coastal risks on island. Now I'm going to talk about the 3 methods of coastal resiliency. So the first on the left is protect, and that is building with the sea and really keeping the sea away from your property, away from critical infrastructure. And with protect, that really equates to hard structures. So this is a picture out in Dionis. There is a rock revetment here. So basically, a very robust essentially rock wall. And then there's bulkhead around this property to help protect the structure. The second is adapt. So you're living with the water, you're allowing areas to flood. You're not trying to keep the water out. This is a picture on Easton Street of a home that has been built, and it is elevated. So that first floor, is off of the ground, and that allows water to flood through the bottom hopefully without reaching the first floor and damaging things that are within the house. And then the third is relocate or retreat, and that is you're moving away from the sea. So we see this quite often on our South Shore because the erosion is so high that if homes are at risk and there's enough property or area on their property to move their home back, then they can do so. Okay, so like I mentioned, in 2020, the Coastal Resilience Plan for the town was developed. It took about a year. The Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee and my predecessor, Vince Murphy, was instrumental in getting this plan developed. There's 5 goals within the plan. If you haven't read the plan, it's pretty long, but it's really well written and there's lots of pictures and it's pretty easy to understand. So I highly recommend you read it. And if you don't want to read the 250 pages of it, definitely read the executive summary. So the goals of the plan are to build coastal resilience and reduce coastal risks from flooding and erosion, enhance safe access to, from, and across the island, promote the health of ecosystems, generate waterfront spaces, connectivity, and safety. And probably the most important of all is to develop implementable strategies that will result in reduction of flood and erosion risk. This was endorsed by the Select Board in 2022. And like I'd mentioned, it includes that risk and hazard assessment. There's also a whole section on homeowner resilience. So you can go to that section if you're interested in implementing some resilient strategies on your property to get some ideas. And then there's also Resilient Nantucket. It's not in the Coastal Resilience Plan, but it's another document that if you have a historic structure, it gives guidelines to adapt that historic structure for flooding. The plan uses NOAA's high scenario for sea level rise, and it's planned out to 2070. There's 40 recommendations that range from policy to nature-based to structural, and most of those should be implemented in the next 10 to 15 years. The cost to implement the whole plan with $20 is about $900 million. So we're talking about a lot of money here. But if we don't do anything, that's even more money that we'll be losing. Okay, so the next slides that I'm going to be going through are the 40 recommendations within the plan. I'm really just going to be sticking to the ones that are from now out to 2030 that are recommended for implementation years. And I do want to say that the implementation dates are not set in stone. Those can be moved around. They were initially developed from the risk assessment. So the ones that you'll see are earlier years, 2022, 2024, 2025. Those ones should be, due to the risk assessment, should be implemented first. And then there's ones that are further along because the risks will not happen until later in the years. Implementation dates are also reliant on, do we have funding for it? Do we have staff capacity for it? I'm the only one doing coastal resilience within the town, so there's only so much I can do as far as project management. And then, do we have the permits for it and all of that? So, so the first one is community outreach on property owner resilience best practices, and the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee and myself are really focusing on that. So one of the examples, again, is that risk assessment brochure that I went over. And then we're doing social media campaigns. So every Thursday on the natural resources social media, so Instagram and Facebook, we are putting out coastal resilience information. So if you're interested on that and you're on social media, give the natural resources a follow. Our Instagram is at NRDACK. And then Facebook, I think, is just Town of Nantucket Natural Resources Department. Updates on zoning bylaws to incorporate coastal resiliency into them. We're working on that. So we're going to be having an internal work group with myself and some planning staff, the planning chair, and then a member from the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. And we're going to be looking at our regulations and see how can we incorporate resiliency into there to reduce risks. Updates to wetland regulations. So those were passed and they're in effect. The Conservation Commission updated their regulations to incorporate resiliency. So for example, in the prior regulations, in the definitions, there was no definition for sea level rise. So that is now in the regulations and the definition of coastal resiliency. So that is great. The strategic retreat and relocation program. So that is to develop an island-wide approach to pursuing strategic retreat and relocation in areas that are at high risk and putting procedures and protocols in place for, especially for homeowners. So if their home is getting very close to the edge of the coastal bank, it can be really confusing to know what's the first step that we take. So in that plan, there'll be more information on that. And I have the scope. I am putting it out to bid shortly. Coastal Resilience Sustainability Interdepartmental Work Group, that's already underway. We meet monthly. And then within that group, the next one, joint staff review of development proposals. We do that within the group. The Coastal Resilience Sustainability Program, that is happening right now within the natural resources. We have a shoreline change monitoring program. So since 2022, there have been stations around the island. I think we have maybe 15 or 18 of stations where every month I go out and I measure how much the coastal bank has lost. And then I also do this before and after storm so that we can say, okay, this storm in this area, we lost this amount of coastal bank. Sediment source and transport study, that is sediment source and that is underway with the town's dredge plan. Stormwater management plan, stormwater assessment and regulations, those are underway with the sewer department. They're just starting those. And then the sediment budget, that can't happen until the dredge plan and sediment source study is over. So that will let us know, how much sediment could we have for implementing these nature-based solutions like dune restoration and that sort of thing. And then whenever the NOAA sea level rise projections get updated, which is about every 4 to 5 years, I go before the select board and they have been adopting using the best available data and using NOAA's high sea level rise scenario for planning purposes. So really we're planning for the worst and hoping for the best and trying to be proactive with that. The next section is downtown. So within this one, let's see so there's building scale resilience at 37 Washington Street. So that's our finance department. That has not happened yet. It is in a flood zone. And so we're trying to evaluate is that department going to stay there? And if it does, then we can reevaluate and see what sort of kind of like simple, low cost resilience planning and implementation we can do there. And then the downtown neighborhood flood barrier phase 1 project, I'm going to explain that later in this presentation, so I won't go through that. Okay, for the Matticat area, we have Matticat road raising and bridge conversion. I just put a grant into the Rural Transportation Grant Program to start looking at this and start the planning process for this area. So first and second bridge are at risk of flooding because Long Pond is tidally influenced. And so as sea level rises, more water will be getting into Long Pond, causing more flooding. And those culverts are the elevations are pretty low. So the Coastal Resilience Plan recommends changing out those culverts to bridges because it's more resilient, allows more water to flow back and forth, and you can get it, higher away from that floodwater. Ames Ave Bridge Resilience. So we have been, or the DPW is in charge of this one, and they have been doing annual through Mass DOT and a third party consultant company as well, doing I just lost my train of thought. Evaluating the bridge there and seeing what is it structurally sound, which it is, and what sort of things need to happen in future years to it to preserve that bridge. We also did a couple years ago, did some plantings on Millie's Bridge. So if you all remember when the stilt house used to be there, and that got removed because during a storm, a lot of sediment overwashed. So all of that dune grass got smothered. So did a lot of the marsh as well. So we went out there with the Nantucket Conservation Association, or sorry, the Matticat Conservation Association, NRD, and some other folks, and did some plantings there. So that dune has actually grown about 20 feet in elevation, which is wonderful. Matticat Erosion Management Pilot and Ames Avenue Bridge Protection, that kind of goes with the Ames Avenue Bridge Resilience. And we have tried to get grants for this project, and the state does not think it's feasible. So they're not into putting money into dune restoration or beach nourishment or anything like that in this area because it's so highly dynamic. And so they think that, if they pay for it, then we do it and a big storm comes, then that money is washed out to sea. So we're kind of re-envisioning this and going to break it down into smaller pieces, because if you go into the plan and you read the actual description of this, it's a huge area, basically from the Matticat Public Beach all the way down to Smith's Point. So that's a very large area. So we're thinking of cutting it into little areas where we need to do some restoration work. Also, the high cost of that is $96 million. So it's it's a lot of money. And then the Department of Public Works Facility and Landfill Resilience, that's underway. They are looking to relocate to Shadbush, which is inland, and the current area of the DPW, because it's right next to Long Pond, again, is at risk of flooding in future years. For the Nantucket Harbor and CO2 sections, let's see. There's a CO2 erosion management and dune resilience, and the Nantucket Conservation Foundation and the trustees are actually working on this project, and that's underway. They are working with a consultant company and have identified a couple areas that are at risk and trying to figure out some nature-based solutions for that area. And then there's the numerical modeling study of CO2 breaching. So that is to look at if CO2 is breached, how is that going to impact our harbor and our downtown? Is it going to cause more flooding in our downtown because there's more water? And so that modeling has not been underway. It's actually more. The high cost here is $250,000, but when we got a quote recently, it's like $500,000 to $800,000. So it's a lot more money than what was estimated back in 2020. For the Sconset area, for 2030, there's a Sconset Bluff Dune restoration. And then there is the Codfish Park dune restoration, the Baxter Road relocation planning, that's already underway. We have 100% engineered plans for that. And then the Sconset Bluff Nearshore Breakwater feasibility study. That was part of that was done years ago. And so that implementation date should really get pushed out further. On the South Shore, there is a Surfside water treatment plant dune restoration. So I don't know if you all were reading the newspaper last year, but the sewer right in front of the sewer treatment facility, I have 3 erosion monitoring stations there, and that lost a lot of dune over the last couple years. And so one of the beds actually had to get filled in because it was at risk of flooding and then infiltrating the whole system. So we just received a scope for that we're evaluating right now to see to hire consultants to do a feasibility and alternative study, which means kind of reassessing the risk assessment and updating it, and then giving different alternatives of what we can do to help preserve that area. The Tom Nevers Field Erosion Mitigation Pilot Project, part of that is underway. So there's funding to take off. There's a lot of concrete and stuff from the Navy base there that's on the shore because of erosion that happened. And so there's funding to take that off. We're just doing the permits, which take a very long time. And then there's plans to do some restoration on that bank as well. The Surfside Emergency Access Planning, that has not happened yet. Again, I have another erosion monitoring station there. And so I think there's 100 feet between the bank and that edge of the road. So that has not happened, but that takes staff and volunteer time. And the Sheep Pond Road relocation study, that is underway. That road is getting relocated behind the homes. Okay, so I know that was a lot. Peter wanted me to focus on the money part of this. So the cost estimates that are within the plan, if you go back and look at it, they are presented in ranges. So a high range and a low range. The low range has 30% contingency, and then the high range has 50% contingency. So really those costs will get refined once for each project. So once you start planning and planning the project, then cost estimates get reworked and redone. And generally, as the project goes on, when you're in the 30% design phase, the cost estimate is going to be a huge number. But then as you work through and you go to 60% design, 90% design, generally that cost comes down because you're fine tuning the project and really being able to know, what the costs are. So if you add up all of the high priority costs, which I forgot to mention, the dark blue circles are high priority. The light blue are medium priority, and then the green are low priority, but I should say that they're all high priority. Like they should all be implemented. So the high priority, that high estimate is about 160 million. The low estimate is about 140 million. For the medium or moderate priority, the high cost is 2 million and the low cost is about a million. And then the low is about $60,000. The low priority high estimate is $60,000. The low estimate is about $20,000. So it's important to note, though, that a majority of that is from the wastewater treatment facility, which is estimated at 43 million. Again, those are just estimates within the plan. When we get the scope, we'll have that refined. And then the Mattocket Erosion and Ames Resilience Bridge, those add up to $109 million. So again, those will be revised as well. So the town is absolutely invested in coastal resiliency. it's quite unique that we actually have my position, Coastal Resilience Coordinator. A lot of other towns do not have that. So to date, there's been about $6.5 million committed for coastal resiliency. And the last couple of years, there's been $1 million a year allocated through town meeting for coastal resilience planning. So that's not necessarily implementation or construction of these large projects. That's for paying for feasibility studies and alternatives assessments and the different surveys that need to happen that really inform what the project should be and can be. That's, going to permitting agencies and speaking with them and all of that. So it's not for construction. And also that is through town administration. And so they have to approve if, if your project can use the money. The money is also not directed explicitly for coastal resilience recommendations within the plan. So for example, if the DBW has a project that is coastal resilience related, they could go to town administration and ask them to use that funding from Article 10. At this town meeting, there's another about $7.5 million requested for town meeting, and that is for to move the Easy Street project forward, which I'll be explaining shortly, and then also for constructing out at Sacajah Pond where it meets Pulpus Road. There's right now there's since 2018 there's basically a Jersey barrier wall between the pond and the road, and it's failing, and it was put there by an emergency order from a 2018 storm. And so that's another project that I'm managing, is to remove that barrier, put a flood wall there, and then within the pond, do some oyster restoration, have a living breakwater to reduce the erosion there. So that's for construction for that project. So the money for implementing the coastal resilience plan recommendations, again, have mostly been for planning. There's been no structural projects ready to construct yet. And that's really where the big money is needed and needs to come from. And that's going to be to fund those projects. It's really going to be a combination of capital funding, grants, donations, anything that we can get to be able to implement those construction projects. So the town is really leaders in the Commonwealth around coastal resiliency. A lot of other towns contact us and say, hey, can we get your template for your coastal resilience plan? We want to have one for our town, our island. I actually just spoke yesterday to the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee on Block Island, who is starting to do coastal resilience planning. So I get calls all the time. I also show a lot of municipal staff from off island, around the island, and give them information about how we started and the projects that are underway here. Recently, too, I'd say in the last year or so, there's been a lot of information in the media relating to Nantucket's coastal resiliency efforts as well. And I'm happy to send you any of those articles if you're interested as well. Okay, so now I'm going to get into the 3 projects that I wanted to highlight today. The first is a pilot project that we actually just implemented last week. And this is using these things called cliff stabilizers, which are temporary devices. They look like, to me, they look like kind of green honeycombs. And so there's a screw anchor here. They're very easy to install. You just need an impact drill. And so you drill it into the coastal bank, and then within these little cubbies, you plant dune grass. And so that helps stabilize the grass and allows the roots to really get hold. And then when the roots are stable, then this whole device comes out, and then you can reuse it somewhere else. So these have never been tried on Nantucket. That's why it's called a pilot project. They were developed in Long Island, which has similar geology to here. but we wanted to try them out here. So we've got two areas at the end, at the very end of Matticat Road, where Matticat Road then turns into Ames Ave. That intersection is experiencing erosion, and there's about 45 feet or so from the edge of the coastal bank to the edge of the road. And the town received lots of letters from Smiths Point residents with their concerns regarding that intersection. You know, if that intersection goes, then how are they going to get to their property? So the town has been doing a lot of work in Matticat over the years, and we'll be meeting with Matticat residents this summer to talk through long-term visions of this area. Again, Matticat is highly dynamic, experiences a lot of erosion, a lot of sediment is moved to and from. So that will be a discussion in the summer. But anyway, getting back to this project, so that's one location at the very end of Matticat Road. If you park at the public parking lot and you're looking at the water, if you just take a right onto the beach, you'll see the project there. And then the other location is at Dionis. And so both of them are town-owned property, and they are the whole project is about 1,600 square feet, so it's really not that big. There's 4 different treatments. So one of them is the cliff stabilizers with plants. The other one is just plants, and then there's a control, which means that there's nothing there. We didn't do anything. And then there's another section for another technology that we haven't gotten permitted yet. But hopefully when we do, we can put that there. And that is to capture the aeolian sediment. So the sediment that is wind blown, which happens a lot here, to capture that and help build up the dune. So we really wanted to compare a highly dynamic area to a lower dynamic area that are both experiencing erosion, to see, you know, is this feasible? Can this work? And then we're going to be collecting data. So taking elevations of each of the areas to see if sediment has accreted there. We'll be taking plant density and then mortality as well. And if this does work, then it could be a great opportunity for private homeowners to use it on their property as well. And the permitting was quite easy. It only took about a month. Okay, so jumping to the Easy Street Flood Mitigation Project. This project was the highest priority within the Coastal Resilience Plan identified by the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. And it's part of the longer range downtown neighborhood flood barrier. So you'll see these kind of red and orange and black lines going through our downtown. Again, this is just concept, but the idea is to create a neighborhood flood barrier. So a flood barrier that is on land, because that's a lot easier to permit. And it would consist of elevating roads, elevating bulkheads, doing some nature-based solutions. So at Children's Beach, elevating that dune there so that it can reduce flooding in the area. So Easy Street project is part of that. And then the next project I'll talk about is the Francis Street Beach Improvement Project, which is also part of the overall downtown neighborhood flood barrier. So this project, we received a grant from the state for a little under $500,000 to start the planning process here and bring a preferred design to 30%. And over here is the project area. So it consists of Easy Street and Broad Street and the roads associated with them. Before I jump into the actual designs, I just want to explain the level of flood protection because it can get confusing. So each of the designs is to reduce that sunny day flooding out to 2070. So in the meantime, it'll protect against certain storms, but it can't protect against every single storm. So during certain storm events, there still will be water on the road. We are trying to plan for the everyday disruption that sunny day flooding is projected to do. So I'll be talking about two design flood elevations. The first one is 6.5 feet NAVD 88. That does not mean that when you're standing on the road, it's 6.5 feet from that. It's from a tidal datum, and some of those, about 2 of those feet, are actually underwater. So right now, let's see, where's my cursor? The top of this bulkhead cap is 6.4 feet. So if you can envision that when I talk about the alternatives, it'll be about here. And then the next one is 8 feet, and that'll be about 1.5 feet higher than the caps. So those are the two design flood elevations I'll be talking about. You can see here that on October 30th, 1991, there was a storm, and the elevation of that water was 5.78 feet NAVD 88. Okay, so like I mentioned, there's 3 design options on the table right now. We did have, to backpedal a little bit, we had 4 concepts, and then we had an open house in the summer at the Whaling Museum. We got community feedback and we refined those concepts to these 3 potential designs. So the first one is to elevate and extend the bulkhead. Let's see if I can find my cursor. Where's it? So this yellow line would be extending the flood barrier. And I should say that the bulkheads right now, there are 3 different sections of bulkheads that are not aligned. There's seams through them, and that's what's causing flooding. They're also not made for keeping water out. They're really for retaining the soil in. So that flood wall would extend here. This black area is showing that those roads would be elevated. So if you can kind of imagine like an extended speed hump that would go up and over, that's what would happen here. Each alternative is most likely going to need a pump station to pump stormwater out, because our stormwater infrastructure is very old, and we are just figuring it out now. And so it's really a mess. So that is the first option. This is a 3D model to kind of give you an idea. Again, there's no like finishes or anything like that, just to get an idea what it could potentially look like. So that this is looking at an Easy Street Basin. This is right at the Dreamland here. So again, that speed hump area. The next 2 are essentially the same, except they have different design flood elevations. So the first one is to that 6.5 feet NAVD 88, elevating the road. And again, that's not you standing on the road and 6.5 feet up. That's you standing on the road and about 4 feet up. So it would be elevating the roads and the associated roads coming into Easy Street and Broad Street. And so that would be the flood protection there. Really, the goal of this is to reduce flooding and also allow access to the Steamship Authority and to, other areas in downtown for emergency access, and to reduce that daily disruption from high tide flooding. So raising roads are more complicated than the first alternative I showed. It really creates these kind of like pockets here where stormwater can accumulate. So again, this is going to need a pump station. And then it can cause for the private properties here access, for their driveways. They would have to be elevated or regraded or something like that to get up to that elevated roadway. This is just showing that difference. It's about a 3-foot difference from the existing elevation of the ground up to the roadway here. And then there would have to be guardrails, because if, for safety reasons, So this is raising it to 8 feet, NAVD 88. So instead of that adaptable road raising, you would go straight to 8 feet, build it now. And this would be about 5 feet or 5.5 feet from the existing grade on Easy Street. So all of the designs here are definitely transformative and will obviously change this area in the downtown as far as visually. But if we take no action, we really can't retreat this road, right? It gets us to the Steamship Authority. That's our lifeline. And so we've got to do something. And if we don't do anything, then it's predicted that flooding will occur in the next 5 years on that daily basis. So for this project, the grant is up in June, and we had another virtual open house just a couple of weeks ago and had a feedback survey. And so we're going to be adding a little bit more visuals to the models and answering a couple more questions that the public had. Initially, these designs were going to go to the select board for them to vote on which one to move forward to that 30% design and then further out to the 100% design. But that is going to be pushed back a little bit. So we'll be getting cost estimates for each of the designs and then showing that public access to the private property access, especially for these road raisings, like for their driveways and to get into their homes. And I should say that for these projects, we've got a lot of questions about, well, what about, the buildings right next to them? Do those have to be elevated? As of right now, there's no bylaw or anything that says that if, for example, the road raising goes in, that the buildings next to it have to get elevated. They only have to get elevated due to building code if there's substantial improvements or damages to the property. So we're just focused on the public critical infrastructure here. Okay, and the last project, sorry, I'm taking a lot of your time. I'm only got a couple more slides. The last project is the Francis Street Beach Improvement Project. Again, that's down here in the overall downtown neighborhood flood barrier. And that we have partners with the Land Bank and Remain. And then there's a whole work group, the Washington Street Collaborative Work Group, that is in charge of this project. Basically, the overall goal is to reduce flooding at this intersection. So Easy Street floods first, and then this intersection floods second. Again, this intersection in Washington Street is critical to getting to and from downtown, and it is at risk of daily flooding as well as sea level rises. So the project here is in this pink dashed area. There is a private property here that is not included, obviously. And so it's looking at what can we do on the beach side and the inland side to reduce flooding from storms and then reduce flooding from rain. So we've got 2 designs here. The first one is the dune swoop. So basically what it is creating a dune system right at the beach and within it embedded with some sort of flood structure that you wouldn't see because it would be under sand and planted with native vegetation. And then there would be this boardwalk that would come up and have ADA access to the beach. And so it's called the dune swoop. And then inland on this parcel and this parcel, which is Land Bank owned, creating a rain garden. So something similar to the one on Easton Street that would be able to collect rain from the road and filter it into here with native plants. So it's really the first flush when it rains is when all the yucky stuff goes straight into our harbor and causes water quality issues and eelgrass to die and all of that. So the idea here is to divert it into the rain garden, let the plants do their thing and filter that stuff out, and then allow the rain to either go down to groundwater or go out to the harbor. And then also at Salt Marsh Center, improve the parking lot there. So this is just another view if you're on the beach looking back towards Washington Street Extension. And then the second design is called the beach overlook. So it's a bit more geometric, but same idea. There would be some sort of flood wall embedded into the dune to reduce those flood pathways from storms. And then there'd be areas for you to sit up and overlook. And then it is ADA accessible. Same thing on the inland side as the dune swoop. And then this is just at the overlook looking out. So I always give this slide that resilience is a process, and you know your risks, you plan for your risks, you implement your project, and then you wait for another storm to come and you evaluate how did that project go? Did it actually do what it was supposed to do? If it didn't, how can we adapt it, change parts of it so that it can meet those goals? And it's just an endless cycle. And for these projects, there's always maintenance and operation and maintenance requirements as well. I think this is the last slide. So the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee, Gary is on that, and we meet every second and fourth Tuesday of the month on Zoom. So it's virtual. Please come and join us. There's 11 members on it that range from a member from the Conservation Commission, a member from the Planning Board, and then there's members from mostly all of the organizations on island that do resiliency. The committee is working on that community outreach to private property owners. We're working on developing different funding mechanisms. So thinking long-term, when I had mentioned that the construction is really where like the big money is needed. So what can we do now to set up certain funding mechanisms that will be able to generate some money for when that construction comes? Again, we're looking at updating the zoning bylaws to incorporate resiliency, and then looking at other town regulations to incorporate resiliency. So how can resiliency be incorporated into the HDC, into, we're doing the planning board now. So we'll go through all those regulatory agencies and see local agencies what needs to get updated. And then they're working on a lot more than that. So I'm gonna end there. I know I've taken a lot of your time. Let me see if I can stop sharing.
This is how we planned to spend our time today, seriously. And this is, at least for me, it's been a real eye opener and a helpful sort of download of basic information that is out there, but you've organized it in a very concise and understandable way for at least my own thinking to get started. So maybe the best thing to do now is to ask the member. I see a bunch of hands up, and we can go one by one, starting with Patty. Is just at the top of my screen with the questions.
Hi, Leah. Thank you so
Hi.
much. I reiterate what Peter just said. I've spent a lot of time in Amsterdam lately, and they have just an amazing history and amount of research. Is there any thought in your mind? I don't know how much you talk to any of these internationally, companies or people. Anyway, states. Do you ever talk to them, or could you show them the plan, or they've just got so much more than we do in these regards?
Yeah, so I went there a couple of years ago, but that was before I was the coastal resilience coordinator, so I definitely need to go back. But actually, the company Arcadis, who developed the coastal resilience plan, is based out of Amsterdam. They're an international company, but that's where they started, so they're well versed in it, and always learning from the Dutch.
Well, I was just looking at the Easy Street, and obviously I know little or nothing, but it just seems to me that we're channeling water here. We're not really putting up barriers. We're channeling water, and the Easy Street looks like if the wall is breached, it's just a pathway down to the other streets, the other basically tributaries. So you're channeling water deeper into the town, and again, whether it's Belgium or Amsterdam, they have experience with these kinds of, city situations. And is there any part of any grant or any way we can get them to look at what you're proposing?
In our grant, we don't have extra funding for that. But I should say that, and I think I mentioned this, for each of the designs. So for example, if water does breach, if the flood wall is picked, and that is redone and elevated, and there's a storm and water does breach that, each of these designs are going to need a pump station, which Amsterdam does a lot, and that is to collect that water on the other side of the wall, and either divert it to back out into the harbor, away from the project, or bring it to the sewer treatment facility and have it there. So yes, definitely want to continue the conversation with and looking at projects in Amsterdam, but the company that we hired, which is also Arcadis for Easy Street, they're based there.
I want to just real quick, do you have any interns? There seem like so many young people are into this. You can't get an intern to help you?
I don't have an intern. That's something that would have to go through, we'd have to rework the natural resources budget and ask for extra funding for interns.
But aren't there some options with interns that they either work or they get paid? Of course, they'd have to have housing, which is an issue, but I thought you could work or pay one of the two to get credit.
I think it depends. When people reach out to me, they want to get paid. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Good. Kathy.
Hi, Leah. Thanks. This is really great. We actually got a letter, I think at our last meeting, from Tom Nevers resident, somebody on Winoma Way. They've had a huge amount of dune erosion there. So it's east of Tom Nevers Field. So it's not, I'm guessing, not part of the project that you've got there. And they're looking to just find some way that they can all, as neighbors, try to read or do plantings, or, I think those little cliff stabilizers look like an interesting thing. And so for just people who are not on that list, they're brand new getting into that situation. So I think the erosion is moving east there. Is there any that you've seen out there? Is there any, should they contact you, or are they just kind of stuck and hoping that their houses don't fall in?
Yeah, they should definitely contact me. I help a lot of people out. That's part of my job. So have them contact me, and then yeah, erosion it's episodic, so you can't really predict where it's going to happen. Some areas could be stable for 10, 20 years, and then a big storm comes and wipes out 30 feet of the coastal bank. So it's really hard to predict what actually is going to happen. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, I think they may have contacted the wrong folks, and they got told just go away. So if they had someone they could talk to, I think that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, send them my info.
Lynn.
Leah, thank you for coming. We look forward to seeing you in Sconset. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. You're following in Vince's footsteps. He was the biggest draw. Never seen so many people arrive to see the meeting. So good luck in August, because
Thank you.
The questions are always constant in Sconset, and they are looking forward to the passing of the warrant article 81. When Vince first came up with these ideas, and we worked with Arcadis as well, the question of cost, of course, is paramount to achieving everything we want to achieve. And grants simply will not cover everything. Has the town given up or modified their idea of betterment tax districts that support the projects within their residential zone?
So they haven't given up. So last year, there were two articles about the coastal resilience districts. One was to map them, and the other was to create like the funding mechanism for them. So the mapping got passed, the other one did not. And so Vince is working on that with a group of consultants to figure out the mapping portion of it. And then at some point, I assume that the funding mechanism part will go back to town meeting. I think there needed to be a lot more education around what these were and the benefits of them, because at town meeting, it seemed like there was a lot of confusion about it. So yes, still in the works.
It is interesting because other locations, instead of separating people into districts, create a tax plan for every resident who pays based on their proximity to the area in question. So in Sconset, the person who lives on Baxter Road on the east side of the road would pay more than someone who lives on Plainfield Road, but everyone would be participating because this is an erosion issue throughout the entire island. And, Mattakit isn't big enough to support the needs for the bridges and what will hit them as well as what hits us. So I still think that's a viable way of looking at alternatives for funding to broaden the basis of how you're paying for the projects, including downtown.
Yes, so for some of those projects that are island wide, for example, Easy Street, everyone uses Easy Street. For if there's specific projects, if they're island wide, then that would be dispersed throughout the tax base. And then the idea of the coastal resilience districts, if it's just benefiting a certain area, that those people that are benefiting from it would be paying for that. So I could give a whole other presentation about coastal resilience districts, but
yes, we appreciate your work, and we are benefiting from the monitoring of sand accretion, and hopefully we're moving from the stick measurement system to a more digital geofencing idea.
yes, I just purchased a GPS unit that is high tech and does elevation. So I just need to get trained in it, and I'll be using that for erosion monitoring from here on out.
Right. Thank you for answering my questions.
Yep. Donna.
Leah, thank you so much. This was very enlightening and also concerning. Did you have an opportunity to present to Brian Turbot and his group before they prepared the annual budget and their reaction and maybe involvement? Because $3+ billion over the next, decade or so, it's a lot of money, and I'm hoping that Brian Turbot and his group have responded to you in some fashion or working with you so we can
Yes.
accomplish this.
Yep. So I should clarify the $3.4 billion, that's if we don't do anything from now out to 2070. That's not how much it'll cost to implement the plan. But again, implementing the plan is about 900 million. So let's call it $1 billion.
Yeah.
So still a lot of money. But yes, I work closely with all of the departments regarding coastal resiliency. So I'm coordinating, lots of meetings and that sort of thing. And with how town meeting works and capital appropriations and all of that, it has to go through the capital committee, the FinCom. So there's lots of dialogue there. And for this year, there's a request at town meeting to move the Easy Street project design to 100% design and permitting, so we can get that going sooner than later. So you have to, depending on what the project is and how much it costs, has to be like its own individual capital request. But yeah, the town is well aware of the coastal resilience plan because it was town funded and it's for the town, and how much that's going to cost.
You
Thank you
might
very
also
much.
mention, you might also mention to Donna that two of the members of our committee, one is on the capital committee, Christy, and Joanna is on the finance committee. So those are the people on their committees who happen to be part of coastal resiliency. So they're
Wonderful.
well
Yeah.
aware of all the stuff we've been talking about.
Thank you very much, Leah. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary, for reminding me that.
So Michael Cody.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Leah, thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. I was wondering, and this is more of a question kind of in a whole of Nantucket approach, but is there any coordination with the Conservation Committee or the trustees or the land bank where they would proactively go out and purchase some of these properties, like down by Francis Street, where you might be able to have a natural rain sink where some of these privately owned homes are, and set a priority to addressing the coastal needs
Yes.
as opposed to just buying land that becomes available.
Yep. And the land bank has been doing that. They've been purchasing, when they're available, properties on the water side of Washington Street. And so the project that I explained is phase one. And then there's other phases, once this pilot project gets done at Francis Street, then the idea is to build out that down Washington Street. So it's a nature-based solution. It allows people to access the water, and a safe way to get into town, because if you walk or bike on Washington Street in the summer, it's
No, it can
not
be
very
dangerous.
safe. So yeah, very dangerous. But we've been working with the private property owners on the water side. If they don't want to sell, which is absolutely their choice, then working with them to what they can do on their property to tie into the project so that it would reduce their risks on their private property and also the risks that the road, for flooding for the road.
Thank you.
Pam. Pam, you need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Leah. It's really nice to meet you, even via Zoom. I've spent a lot of time with Vince on the Baxter Road and Arcadis study.
Okay.
And one of the things that's been so evident with everything going on in Sconset is how the full-time residents of the island sometimes react to these measures. And I'm very concerned about public education and how your efforts can really be disseminated to the public in a way that they really understand the overall impact on the island. I think sometimes the shoreline homes, whether they be in Matticat or in Tom Nevers or in Brant Point, are often looked at as, oh, those are the houses that those summer people own, so it doesn't really concern us. Maybe there's more feeling about the downtown, but I really hope you get a lot of support and a lot of exposure because all of these projects are so critical. I also had a quick question on why you think the state of Massachusetts is so opposed to things like beach reclamation projects. It's very interesting as you travel around the country, especially maybe in the Southeast, someplace like Florida. You constantly see them replenishing beaches and you see barges moving sand and you see this constant sort of, let's try to keep this intact as much as we can. So I just think it's interesting and I wonder what your feeling is on why some states do it and why some don't.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the state, but we do hear a lot of, people that live in Florida, like, well, I can do this in Florida. And it's like, well, we cannot do it in Massachusetts. The wetlands regulations in Massachusetts are very, very strict. And so, I mean, for good measure, right? Like they don't want a Walmart built on a marsh. that's great. But when we're talking about coastal resiliency, a lot of the state regulations have not been updated for like 20, 40 years. And so they need to definitely get updated so that these projects can happen quicker and are able to happen as well. So I can't give you a good answer. Like apparently for the dredging you can apply, but they say you can apply for that. If you're, pumping sand to nourish beaches on the South Shore, but they never issue permits. So I don't know.
Okay.
We just have to work with what we
What you
can right now.
So Brad Strand, if you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Brad Strand. I'm a summer resident in Matticat.
Thanks.
So Leah, thank you very much for the presentation. Very helpful and informative. One of the things that jumped out at me when you were going through those different list of projects was that a large number of projects had costs that were way more than the anticipated benefits. And so I'm wondering, given that, what are your thoughts about trying to capture mind share of people to increase their sense of urgency when essentially what we're putting in front of them is here's, spend $2 to save $1.
So, sorry, can you repeat the question?
If you look on those charts that you had where you had listed of projects,
Yep.
there were a number of them that said, oh, the cost of this on the low end is going to be $70 million. Estimated benefits, $30 million. And so it's a hard sell to get somebody to spend a whole bunch more money on something than potentially they'd even be saving. So my question is, how do you go about spinning that in a way that's going to make people say, oh my gosh, even though this is so much money, it's really important?
Yeah, that's a great question. So those estimates, it's hard to estimate like all of the benefits, right? It's really hard to put a number on intrinsic value. And when you go out to nature, like what that does for your health and all of that stuff. So those benefits should definitely be updated depending on each recommendation. But if, when it is updated, if the benefit is less than how much it's going to cost, I think we really need to look at, what are we trying to do here? What are we trying to save or protect? And see, is it worth it? And how does the community feel about that? So it's definitely, part of my job is is education. I will absolutely say I want to do more of it. There's never enough education, especially around coastal resiliency and risks and all of that. So yeah, I think it definitely has to be like a community discussion.
Yeah, it seems like a little investment in marketing communications here could potentially go a long way because, if you go through those list of projects, I mean, there are a lot of them that are like way more cost than proposed benefits. So you need to find a way to kind of do this, right?
Yeah.
Or at least sell the intangibles.
Yeah, I'll have to take a class in that.
So are there, Gary, I see your hand is up again. Yeah. Oh, you're actually up for the first time.
Yep.
Yep.
Thanks, Leah. She's covering a lot of the stuff that we're doing, and as you can tell from her presentation, she's also doing personally a lot of the stuff that we're doing. I mean, some of these issues, and Brad, to answer part of your question is to the extent that the improvements we're talking about are going to help a certain section of our island, certain community, those at the end of the day, those costs will have to be shared between the town and the community. And that's where I know Matt Fee, a member of our committee, talks about betterments all of the time. In order to do that, to get these projects approved, the community needs to approve that. And so they'll be making the decision, and also probably has to go to town meeting. So that's where the judgment is made as to whether or not the expenditure is worth the saving of whatever it is. Some of those issues are very tough. If you're talking about saving historic structures, question is, well, you know, what happens if a lot of these historic structures are no longer able to survive? Is that going to hurt the island's importance generally and desirability of people to visit or not? And those are really tough. But for individual communities where the betterments are involved, people will be voting on those. And if the community decides they don't want to spend their own money, it's not that important to them, then they won't happen. And those improvements will not be made. With respect to the structural issues, I know one of the things I talk about a lot at the committee, the most important thing we have to worry about is our infrastructure. We need to make sure that the ferry terminal is raised by the ferry terminal administration so that it can continue to be a way for people and trucks to get on and off the island. The same thing with our water supply, our sewage facilities. So there, we don't have to have a specific vote from a community. Those are so vital to the island, and they are, in many respects, big bucks. And hopefully, we'll be able to get our share of funding from either the state of Massachusetts or even the federal government. Now that Donald Trump has taken FEMA apart, I don't know where some of these emergency funds are going to come from. And that might be an issue coming up in the future if people can start thinking about that now. But right now, those island-wide projects need to be done in order to save the survival of the ability of people to come and go, whether it's the airport, the water supply, the sewer system, ferry and things like that. So those are the things that I keep worrying about and we're working on. But we need big grants. And unfortunately, as Leah knows and Vince has told us in the past, when we compete with other jurisdictions for federal funding, they look at Nantucket and people say, well, as you know, there's a lot of rich people on that island and it's only a small population. You know, it's 17,000 year-round people and maybe it's bigger in the summer, but those are just seasonal people. And then we have to fight against whether it's Boston has gotten good federal funding for its shoreline, even Florida, Miami has gotten billions from the federal government because the amount of the population that is being affected is huge. And so we have a difficult issue in fighting for the federal funds that may be available for this coastal resilience stuff, but we're trying to do it. We're doing the best we can.
So, Michael, you have another question or observation? Yeah.
I just had a follow-up question, and Brad's question on market communications kind of triggered this for me. But you know, if we're saying that there's kind of a group in Sconset that's going to pay for the Baxter Road movement, isn't that a little bit, I don't want to say naive, but all of us on Nantucket benefit by Sankaty Light and Baxter Road and everything else. And I think trying to isolate this to areas of the town that are going to pay for it may be a bit of a mistake. And what we should think about is educating all of the Nantucket citizens to the precious value of Nantucket as a community, whether you're scalloping in Mattocket or going out to play golf at Sankaty. You're always affected, even if you live downtown. And I just wonder if maybe tactically we ought to think broader than, you know, this is an isolated Sconset issue or Mattocket issue or Easy Street issue. It's really a Nantucket issue. And it's, you know, I don't know where we are on that, but it strikes me that goes to this communications effort.
Yeah, this is a very interesting, you know, kind of idea that I think Michael and Brad and others have mentioned here. But I think, at least for us today, and as we think about this in the future, you know, there are really two questions. One is what needs to be done, and what is the cost of that? And we understand those costs are estimates, best estimates that one can make at any one time. And then, you know, two things will change as the cost estimates. One, inflation, whatever you want to call it, is somewhat unpredictable. And two are that the conditions that we are forecasting may change as well. And we may need to do things sooner or more or less or whatever, and that's all going to change. So all we can do is make our best educated estimate, probably on science and the ways one normally does cost estimates to figure out the costs. But then this other issue is that is confounding us on this call is really a political issue, and that is, who's going to pay for it and how can it be done? And I think that our goal first ought to be to get our arms around what needs to be done and when it needs to be done. And I think this is a good start because we see actual projects that are in the process of being tackled. And we see a list of other things that are on the radar screen that are going to need to be brought forward, and some of the costs. So my question for Leah, and put you on the spot, Leah. You don't have to answer this, but if you have an answer, I'd be appreciated. As I understand it, as we sit today, we're looking at about $900 million of costs, most of them capital costs, that need to be spent in some future time period. And that's what I'm kind of missing is whether we're looking at 2070 there, or we're looking at 10 years from now, or what does that number relate to? And then sort of part B of the question is, if you just look ahead 10 years, what is the best guesstimate right now of the capital costs that the voters on Nantucket will be faced with having to raise to preserve things as more or less as they are today?
Yeah, so great question, Peter. To answer your first question, that 900 million estimate is basically from when the plan was implemented, so 2021, out to 2050. The plan goes out to 2070, but some of if you look through the tables that I put up there, some of the target implementation years are 2050-ish. So yeah, so there's that. But as far as from like now out to 2030, let me bring up, where'd it go? I had a table on that.
Is that the 137 or something like that?
Yes, it is. The high estimate for the projects that have target implementation years out to 2030 is about 155 million. But a lot of that is the two Mattakit projects and the Surfside treatment plant. So I should say that doesn't take into consideration like all of the other, which is very tricky, all of the other capital requests to make this town run. So the coastal resilience recommendations are gonna be competing with other town needed things.
Yeah,
So
that's kind
it's a
of
fine line there. That's why this year I have two capital appropriations at town meeting to move some of these projects forward. And then the $1 million a year for coastal resilience planning.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was moving toward. And that's why, so 2030 gets us sort of 5 years, 5 or 6 years, I guess, depending on how the fiscal years cut out. So when we're to go to 2035, and maybe that's an unfair question today, but do you have in your mind what the following 2030 to 2035 is likely to require?
I don't off the top of my head, but I am working with, so the select board have a strategic plan, and within that, the priority that I was set to work on is to create like a timeline or a roadmap for coastal resilience plan projects to get within the capital plan, like for the next, 10 years or so. So currently working on it.
Okay, great, great. So it looks to me like the Dutch were smart to take Manhattan Island and let the English have Nantucket. Yeah, but the Dutch will be back, or they are back, I guess,
Yeah.
with the helping to plan what we have. I see Kathy has her hand up, and then probably say thank you so much, Kathy.
Yeah, just quickly, back to the betterments discussion. I just wanted to throw this out there. I recall, and this is a number 15, 20 years ago, when the sewers were being put in and how to pay for the sewers. I remember that. And Tom Nevers, since we're never going to get sewers, there was a discussion about whether that should be a betterments project as well. So I think they ended up, obviously, Tom Nevers residents benefit from sewers that are all over the downtown area and wherever we go. But I think it ended up being a 60-40 split. So those who use the sewers pay the sewer fees, and then the tax base pays, I think it was, I don't know which was 60 and which was 40, but there's another way to do betterments where it's not all or nothing. It can be allocated by a percentage. So I just throw that out there as something that the town has done before.
Yeah, yeah. It's the political question of how you split up.
All betterments are that way.
It's all one island, and that's why we go there. And then we all have our own personal favorite parts of the island, starting with wherever our houses are. And it's short-sighted to basically say it's somebody else's problem if you're basically chopping the island up piece by piece and saying goodbye to it. But anyway.
No one helped me with my septic system when I have to replace it.
Yeah, exactly. But well, that's good. Leah, thank you so much. I know that Saturday was a stretch for you. We apologize to your daughter, right? That we have deprived her of her mother. But being a father, I know fathers have an important role as well. And I'm just, when I step back and think about, the job that you're doing and the job that so many others are doing on Nantucket, we are really so fortunate to have smart people who are at the top of their game, helping us, exist and move forward. And so thank you, for this presentation and your service. And I think everybody joins me in that.
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for having me today. And if you have any further questions or want to, chat about anything coastal resilience related, please reach out to me.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your Saturday. Thanks again.
Yeah, we will, now that we have this cloud of hanging over us, which existed before your presentation. Great. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
So we'll just move down through the agenda then. Anything further on Town Council Study Committee?
Yes, just a wrap up. The completed charter draft is now on the TCSC website, and it now has been sent to KP Law for review. There's also an Instagram site that Bo Barber put up, and it's something like Nantucketers for the Town Council. If anyone would like to post a comment in support or otherwise as to having a town council on Nantucket instead of ATM. There are now 3 pre-ATM informational sessions coming up. 2 are going to be on Zoom, so we can participate, and I hope that folks will do so. First one is Thursday, April 10th at 6 p.m. Those who are on island, it will be at the community room at Fort Fairgrounds. The second one is Saturday, April 12th. That also will be in the community room. And the third is Monday, April 14th at the Athenaeum. We're not sure yet if Zoom is available there. Joe Grouse, our chair, is going to be presenting, and then there will be plenty of time for Q&A. Our next TCSC meeting is going to be Monday, April 7th, this coming Monday at 3 p.m. You're welcome to join us. At the ATM, Joe is going to, as I've mentioned before, is going to be giving a brief address. He has a couple of minutes at the ATM, and he is permitted to answer a couple of questions. He has time for that. Also, a fact sheet is being developed, and it will be available for all attendees. I wish to close today with a comment. We are not officially mentioned in the proposed charter. I've been complimented on my efforts, but unfortunately, non-voting taxpayers are not mentioned. We are collected into the verbiage of residents. However, we do have a voice, and as you can see, even with Gary and today's presentation by Leah, a number of us are involved in committees, and it's very important because looking at our non-voting taxpayer group, there are so many members who are talented, who have the expertise, and it's needed, especially now more than ever on Nantucket, to protect and preserve our community here.
Donna, really quickly, you mentioned April 12th. What time was that?
April 12th is at I think it's 6. Oh, wait a minute.
It's in the.
I have to
think
get
it's-
back to you
yeah.
on that.
I think it's in the
I
evening.
think it's
Yeah.
10 at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
They're both at 6, and then the Athenaeum is at 10 o'clock.
Thank you.
There's one Saturday, there's one day and 2 evening presentations.
And Donna, I'm hoping to attend that one in person.
Oh, good. That would be great, Pam. I'll be on Zoom.
Donna, just a quick question. I know you worked very hard on trying to get us included in this, but what is the reluctance to include the non-voting taxpayers
I'm
in this?
glad
I just
you
don't
asked.
I just don't understand why they're so negative.
I'm glad you asked. Just an FYI, Joe Grouse was a non-voting taxpayer for years. And Joe and I have had one-on-one conversations about this because, as Pam knows, we've had a couple of challenging meetings when I bring up non-voting taxpayers. And I've not addressed this before, but it has been challenging. There's something about, and Joe said it too, because now he's a voting taxpayer. It's something intrinsic in the year-round residents who are voters. And I actually wanted to ask if this came up, and I thank you, Michael, for bringing it up. I actually wanted to ask any of our members who are in either Washington or California or Florida or Texas, how are their year-round residents reacting? Because rationally, we have so much to offer, and for some reason, it's kind of like, dare I say, please contribute, but we'll take care of things ourselves. And I don't quite, I've been trying to move a mountain, and they listen, and then they say, well, you're already on committees. And I said, yes, but we are an intrinsic part of Nantucket. And actually, we're the major part of Nantucket. So it defies rationality. I don't get it.
So Pam, do you have a comment on this or?
Yeah, I think one of the things that kind of feeds back into this is that in a town council form of government, not unlike the selectmen right now, any of us can go to a meeting. We can stand up, we can express our concerns. We don't have to introduce ourselves as non-voting taxpayers. We're just residents paying taxes. So I think there is this perception that that we don't have to be singled out because we have a voice just by being able to go and voice our concerns at these meetings. And
I think it's
not-
different,
You think
Pam.
it's
I
different?
disagree.
Okay.
I
Okay.
disagree.
So let me
Um,
weigh in on this controversy, because I do have a view, and it is the following. Miami, so you asked about Miami and Washington. I can talk to about Miami and Washington.
Fine.
And non-resident taxpayers in Miami and Washington, it was just not a big numerical number of people. It's a nothing. And I think that's the issue here. How much of a voice you have? Too much of a voice threatens the local people who live in Nantucket year round. They don't want, and I think correctly don't want, outside people who don't live and vote there to control their destiny. And so they want to maintain control. I think, from my point of view as a person who's owned a house up there for 15 years, I'm pretty happy with the local government. There are little things that bother me and bother everything, but by and large, if it were really bad, I wouldn't continue to own my house, because there are other places that are also delightful that one can go to. So I think that we are an important voice. We have a voice. We certainly are an overwhelming amount of the financial support for the island, but that doesn't give us the right to vote under the Massachusetts Constitution. And so we should speak up when we should speak up, and let people know what we need to do, but we shouldn't become obsessed with not having a member on the council and all the rest of that. Gene.
Yeah, my feeling is that I don't, even though I'm a non-voting taxpayer, I don't think I should be able to vote for a councilman or any other political election if I'm not a resident. And I think that if it were included that we could vote one way or other, that the state legislature would not approve it. And if that were the case, we'd be, so if that's the case, then it would be a waste of time for all the work that's been done. So I think maybe one of Joe's, and I haven't talked to Joe about this, but maybe one of the thoughts is that if we want to make the change, we have to get the approval of the state legislature or the attorney general or whomever it is, and that may not happen if we're sort of we're giving people the right to vote in two places, and that may also be unconstitutional. But I think it really opens up a whole can of worms.
Yeah. The other thing, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but the issue here, the issue we're discussing is changing the form of government of Nantucket. And we can't, the issue is not whether or not non-voting taxpayers ought to have a vote or be on the council. And I think that we distract from that issue, which we're in favor of, having a town council form of government, by injecting this issue into the whole process and make it more likely by injecting that the effort to change the form of government will fail. So I think that, we're in a good place. I appreciate what Donna has done. And I'm hoping that we get a change of government because I think it will be good for everybody on Nantucket, voting taxpayers and non-voting taxpayers alike. And then if that change happens, if we move forward, I think the value we can bring to the game, we continue to bring to the game. And I think that our committee will be a committee under the new council rather than the select board, but who knows? So Patty, you need to unmute yourself.
I think there's many ways to skin a cat. I don't think we're going to get a vote, but I do think what Steve has done and the more people that are aware of our committee, that goes a long way to maybe changing things in the long term. I think never before have I been more concerned not just about our political situation in the country, but the situation on Nantucket, where I look at the budget and it was eye-popping. And we do need a voice because you can't come up with all the money you need for an old folks home and still do coastal resiliency. And when you're weighing the scales, you need to make sure that the public knows that. And the more people talking about it, the more you change the meter. So I think somebody was talking about more PR. Again, I think that's crucial in our situation as a committee to get out to more people that there is somebody that represents you. I don't know if represent is the word, but we need to make them aware that there are some major decisions coming down the road financially, and we need to make sure people are talking about it.
So I think that's a very good point, and it sort of meshes with the next issue on the agenda, which is representation at the annual town meeting. And so if we could sort of glide into that, and I think we can continue this discussion under that point. Or Donna, if you want to have a last word.
Yes, just a wrap up. This was never, the fact that one of us is on this TCSE committee was never about getting a vote. It was about just being made aware of us and also to have a greater voice. But not to vote. There's no way we can vote. It's unconstitutional.
Yeah. Is there a draft now of
The draft is up on the, it's under the general umbrella of the Nantucket MA Gov website. And if you look down under committees, the TCSC, and then you go under there is the draft. The draft is there now. I just wanted to advise everybody that we're going to be just part of residents.
I have a link,
which is fine.
Yeah.
See the agenda. You can see their next meeting. You can see the announcements of all of those outreach sessions are there.
Yes.
As well as the draft. It's there.
Yes, everything is there.
Thanks, Kathy.
Good. So then,
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but if you add up all the wants and desires, we're talking about several $1 billion. And I think there's a lot of expertise in this non-resident or non-voting resident, whatever the hell it is, what we are. And I think that the town could benefit by knowing what some of that is, because Nantucket has never had this kind of capital requirements. And some of them are just not something that you can ignore, like coastal resiliency. If you ignore it, there is no Nantucket.
Exactly. So that brings us to the next subject without actually leaving this subject.
Well done. Nice transition.
I'll put it this way. We need to figure out who's going to represent us, but I also think we need to, in the short time that we have available, which is as much time as we want, but it's getting pretty long right now. Talk about what positions ought to be taken, because this is our last meeting, I think, or do we have a meeting before the annual town meeting? Do we
Next
have a?
is the Saturday after town meeting.
Okay, so, well, I guess the question will be whether we need to have another meeting before the town meeting. But first off, I'm not available. My wife is going to have some surgery just before the annual town meeting, and so I need to be around to help her out. I know Peter is not available. And Kathy, are you going to be at the annual town meeting or?
Yes.
Yeah, so in the normal world, I would basically ask Kathy to represent us at the annual town meeting. And she's done that before. I think she probably also would appreciate some guidance, because it seems to me that there are a few issues that we may want to be heard on. That's number one. What are the issues? And number two, and this goes back to Patty and Steve, really, what should we be doing prior to the annual town meeting to basically advertise, so to speak, what our positions are? And what I actually have in mind is that there are at least 2 and maybe 3 issues that I'm aware of that we have taken positions on, either by vote or by sort of consensus discussion. And those are the Old Island home issue, which is, I think, what Michael just had in mind, and several of us do, which is basically an overall capital budget issue. The short-term rental issues, and now I think we would also want to be supportive if support is needed, and I'm not sure that it is, in making sure that the coastal resiliency articles, as I understand, there are 2 financing articles for coastal resilience, are passed. And the way I put it is, at this point, I have written on behalf of the committee to the select board and to others a letter basically saying that we think that the financial proposition for the Old Island home is not a prudent proposition. The idea being that we're not for or against an Old Island home. It's just that the financial deal that they've come up with for doing it doesn't make financial sense because of basically unaccounted for risks that are clearly more present every day as we go forward under this new administration. And I think there's a way of saying that even more clearly. I've not sent my letter to the Inky or the current, but this is where we could use some help from the Flax in our group, and the question would be also whether Kathy is comfortable representing our position on that issue, if necessary, at the annual town meeting. And I think
in any case would be reading the statement that have, whatever statement is given to me.
Yeah. And then are there any other issues that should be on our agenda for the annual town meeting for Kathy to be aware of and ready for? Yeah. So
my hand's been up, Peter.
Yeah, go ahead.
Peter, I do not understand why you did not release that letter to the Inky and to the Current. We all agreed at the last meeting that the Old Island, our island home.
It's our island home.
Right, is a fiscal disaster for the island. There was no disagreement about that. You put together a beautiful letter, you send it to the select board. That's like a tree falling in the forest. No one knows it. Our constituents do not know that we're looking out for them because our constituents, as Dawn Holgate said, we're going to pay for the whole damn thing. So why don't you, I can't believe, how could you not have released that letter? You want to wait till the last minute? There's 15 different programs that the people from the island home have been using to convince everyone to go along. None of them talk about the financial impropriety of the whole proposal, especially since they haven't even come up with a final bid, a fixed price yet. And we haven't released a letter, so there's no voice. We're speaking not at all for our constituents, and I think that's a mistake.
Good. Yeah, Patty.
Could we just, it's getting to be such a late hour, could we just, each one of us owe you a note, an email, whatever, what we want to see, and maybe next meeting we could hash it out and have the meeting before, obviously, town meeting, and to make a statement, or you can, congeal all of the comments and here's what I would put down and we can approve it or not approve it. But I don't think we're going to solve this in the next few minutes.
Okay. Next, Gene.
Yeah, I think that we have to get that letter out. I agree with Gary on getting the letter out as quickly as possible regarding our island home. I did write a letter that was in the Inky and regarding my view on it, but obviously I was acting personally, not as a member of the committee. But I think that's something that we really need to get out quickly and make a fuss about. I mean, because we're going to wind up paying, it's a lot more than $100 million, as we all know. There's a $5 or $6 million a year loss, that operating loss. They didn't include the financing of the $100 million or whatever. It's going to be 125 million after the cost of lumber goes way up. We really, if we're against it, we ought to make a big fuss about it. And the other area that I would be concerned about, and I don't know how we do it, but the whole area of affordable housing, I think, is really critical to our community. If we don't have affordable housing, we don't have policemen, we don't have firemen, we don't have people to mow our lawns, people to fix our plumbing when it goes bad, et cetera, et cetera. For all of the non-voting taxpayers, that really is critical. And I think, I don't know what is in the current, what's going to be voted at town meeting, but we should be in favor of anything that is going to create more affordable housing, even though we're again going to pay 80% of the cost. But I think those are costs that most of us probably want to spend.
Donna.
Peter, do you think we should address town council and just say, I don't know,
I think
as non-voting taxpayers, should we say anything at all about town council?
Yes, I think.
I think
In a certain way, maybe?
we're in favor of it, but I think we don't want to be the major voice on town council or whatever.
It'll boomerang.
But you want to keep the ACNVT in the town charter. You don't want it to come out, right?
It's not
in the charter right now.
That's what I started out by explaining.
So they're
We're
taking
not in the charter.
current charter. So the current charter, which made ACNVT exist, that's not in the charter. That's just in the bylaws.
Oh, it's in the bylaws, but it's not in the proposed charter draft. No.
My question is it coming out of the bylaws, or is it going to stay the way it is now, which is different, whole different situation?
It's a different, it has not been touched.
Okay.
It has not been touched.
It kind of stays the way it is now, is my understanding of it. And that's why I've not been majorly concerned
We're not
about.
losing anything, we're just not gaining anything.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
I
Well
think
put.
Yeah.
you are
And-
losing something. You are losing something because I'm not sure that's a problem, by the way, if we lose something. But if the new charter doesn't even mention the advisory committee for non-voting taxpayers, and the old bylaw stays in effect, the old bylaw only says we can advise the select board. It doesn't say anything about advising anybody else. So we have no purpose in life once the town, and as far as I'm concerned, that's okay. If we got the new town council, we're fine, because we can come to every meeting, and I'm not worried about the advisory committee for non-voting taxpayers. But the fact that the bylaw remains will be moot, because there is no select board for them to advise anymore.
Yeah, and Gary, that is true of every single bylaw in the charter that mentions the select board. And so what one presumes, but don't know, that the word select board will either be changed to town council or reinterpreted as town council.
That would be fine.
So
That would be
that's
fine.
why I'm kind of not worried about it.
Yeah.
And also I'll note that your position was initially, I think, that this committee ought to go away because we won't need it.
No.
But anyway, the Lynn,
Yeah, just, I agree that the letter should be in the Inky, and I was surprised you didn't send it. But at this time, I think you could use it in such a way that the letter to the select board is what we are to do, an annual report on where we think the town should be, which coincides very nicely with the annual town meeting. So in effect, I think your letter in the Inky should include, we advise the select board, and in transparency, we want to share what we shared with them. And our top priority seemed to have been our island home for financial reasons, that the town is not considered the sale of the property where it stands now, or selling the land to another organization when it's finally built, like Martha's Vineyard is doing, considering other alternatives to the financial side of this without saying I'm for or against the entity itself, but also touching on, affordable housing is essential. Anything that's in a warrant article, I feel you can comment on. So that's coastal resiliency. We are for what the town is doing, and we are for what the town is doing on affordable housing, but we are concerned about our island home. And this is what we shared with the select board. So that we don't have a real constituency. We're not elected. I don't represent the town of Sconset, but you are on this because you're thoughtful people with relevant backgrounds. So I would presume that the annual report you give the select board is something you should share in the Inky as a way of communicating to those people who are non-resident taxpayers, who become more aware of where we try to influence the select board to consider things correctly.
I think it's a good idea to sort of do a rundown of the positions. The letter that I wrote, quite frankly, is too long for the Inky.
So make it shorter.
Well, you'd have to rewrite it all. And I'm telling you, they have a word limit generally. They violate that every once in a while. In addition, my main point is the risks. And it turns out there's a new risk that I didn't even anticipate that has come up in recent Our Island Home meetings, and that is the tariff risk. Because it looks like the tariff on steel and lumber is going to impact construction of that building as well. And they just sort of brush it off. But I can rewrite something and send it and try to get it within their word limit. which is a good idea. And I think not a bad idea for other people to follow up with their own letters to the editor as well.
Okay.
And in terms of my strategy to address Gary's original point, I thought that firing all the bullets or any bullets back when I wrote that was way too early in the process. There's this flurry of back and forth letters in the INCI that occurs closer to the town meeting, and we're now closer to the town meeting.
Okay, just a couple things, just so you know, letters, the editor having to do with town meeting and articles, they won't allow them the week before town meeting. So the deadline for any letters to the editor in the INCI, that's not the current, they'll still publish, is would be like 4 p.m. on April 22nd. Just so you know. We can get in letters next week and the week after, but the 22nd is the last time for the INCI. And then I also wanted to just bring up, since we're talking the affordable housing and maybe taking a position on that, is are people aware of the article? And this is another thing we could weigh in on because it is an article in the warrant, the seasonal community designation and what that means for the island. Because it's new legislation passed by the state in August, it's been very low key. The town was extraordinarily involved in it. And Nantucket is specifically called out along with Martha's Vineyard as a designated seasonal community. You can also qualify as a seasonal community if you meet certain criteria. You have to apply for places like the Berkshires, the Cape and the Islands towns can apply for it. But you need to have a very, very high percentage of seasonal homes, a certain percentage Nantucket has in the state seasonal homes. And you also have to have a very high number of short-term rentals, which I thought was really interesting as another criteria. So I think it's Article 82 in the warrant. It's already the law, and for some reason the town has put it on the warrant to see, just so people are aware of it and vote for it. I can't imagine they would vote against it, but it's created specifically to deal with and provide many more options for affordable housing for communities like Nantucket. That's why it exists. It's really an affordable housing support mechanism, which allows certain things in zoning that were not previously allowed. So you'll also see, if you look through the zoning changes, and this is something that's just not on the forefront, I'm just learning about it, is a lot of the zoning changes they put in is basically to comply with this law.
Okay, thanks. We'll take a look at that. If you could send me whatever the citation is to the state law that was just passed or passed in August. One other aspect of the Our Island Home, of course, is the $12 million of that is for what will essentially be affordable housing, which will be housing for staff and government employees. And that's one of the reasons that the price tag is what it is on the Our Island Home.
If we needed to meet again, it would have to be the 19th, I'm guessing, which is in 2 weeks.
Okay. Should we have a meeting in 2 weeks, or should we just go on with our regular schedule?
I suggest we have another meeting.
Okay.
Before the deadline.
Okay.
To get a letter in to the INCI. But I defer to the committee.
You know, the beautiful thing about the letter that Peter drafted already is that we're not coming out against the Our Home. We are just saying we agree with the Capital Committee that this is not the right proposal, and they have to go back to the drawing board and come up with something more financially prudent. That's the essence of that letter. Yeah. We're not saying we're against it. We're saying this proposal is financially imprudent, and that's why we agree with the Capital Committee.
But that's not really the case, because
it is the case.
Well, no, but we're saying that you've got more important agendas like resiliency. We are saying that you can't put all that money into one project when there are so many, and that you can't continue to support both projects.
That the letter actually, I think toward the end, will, while not specifically mentioning capital resiliency, I believe it does say that our ability to finance all of the, myriad capital expenditures that appear to be necessary in the next 10 years or whatever, may be compromised or are likely to be compromised by spending this money this way at this time.
Including affordable
I think
housing.
I say something like that toward the end, the conclusion.
Right, yes, it was nicely done.
Yeah. And because I mean, the big picture is how much is too much? Where is the tipping point on all this? And it's hard to people can't. It's hard for people to look ahead because they have faith that somebody's going to take care of them, and that may not be the case now.
Let me just add one more comment with respect to the annual town meeting. I personally don't think we should be commenting on anything except that which we really think is bad for the seasonal population. And as much as I think the coastal resiliency stuff is great, we've never opposed it. It's doing fine. It'll get approved anyway. I don't think we should talk about every one of these issues because they're not really important to us. Some of the short-term rental was important to us, and that's why we spoke about it. Yeah. And the island home thing is very important to us because financially it's going to be a disaster for the seasonal population. But everything else, I think we should be quiet about. They don't really want to hear from us very much.
I agree with you. Okay, so should we meet on the 19th? Yeah. So let's that's meeting on the 19th. It will just be us without outside, an outside speaker, and we'll finalize what we need to finalize. I would plan to actually start getting things to the Inky before that, so we'll have something additional in writing, and trying to keep it short, sweet, and to the point, which is difficult. Okay. Let's see. So is there any public comment? I think, I don't know whether people have left the public or.
No, they're still here.
Yeah. Any public comment? If you have, raise your hand or whatever, and so we can just see, so we don't fly by without giving you a chance to speak. Nope, not seeing any or hearing any.
Motion to adjourn. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Okay, and is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, good. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks all of you who are just coming to look for the first time, and I hope it's been a worthwhile 2.25 hours for you. Thanks.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.